These are sort of like pizzas and sort of like hash browns, and they make a really good hors d'oeuvre if you're going to throw a fancy party, or they make a good breakfast, they make a good lunch, they make a good dinner. So anyway, I started the whole process first. This is very important. I took a nice, very ripe tomato that I got at a farmer's market, not the supermarket. Another acceptable alternative would have been to grow it in my garden, but my tomatoes aren't ripe yet. They're still just a bunch of little flowers out there. Anyway, a ripe tomato that I got at the farmer's market, I sliced it very thinly, and I salted it and put it between paper towels. This is going to draw out a lot of the moisture, which is important for this dish. I've been letting this sit so far for about a half hour. Another component that I have prepped is I have grated some Parmesan cheese, and I have cubed some feta. The third component I need to prep is the potato. This is a medium-ish sized Yukon Gold potato. I actually don't like potatoes that much, but I find Yukon Gold to be the most tolerable of potatoes. It has a nice, not too starchy texture to it. It doesn't tend to taste like dirt like russet potatoes do. We're going to grate this on the large size of the box grater. Okay, it's time for a pop quiz now. What's the secret to good browning? Time's up. The answer was B, a lack of moisture. So that means we have to void our grated potatoes of moisture somehow. Best way to do it is to actually just squeeze it with your hands. I normally would just squeeze it straight into the sink, but I'm going to do it into this bowl just to show you how much water is in these things. That is not conducive to good sautéing. Alright, throw that out. If we'd kept that water in our potatoes, they would have turned gray, not brown, and they would have been mushy instead of crisp. So, good to get rid of that. I like to even take a paper towel after I've done that and just pat the mound of potatoes drier. After you've done that, you want to season them a little bit with some salt and some white pepper. I just lazily mix it slightly on the cutting board. Oh, and I almost forgot, before I started the process, I picked some little pieces of basil from my garden outside. As far as I'm concerned, dry basil does not exist. Fresh, please. Now that everything is prepped and I've moved my camera to a different angle, it's time to actually saute these guys. I have this pan, it's a non-stick with about a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Have it on medium-high heat. It's pretty hot. We're almost at that stage where we're starting to see some faint wisps of smoke, so it's time to form the patties. I usually form each patty big enough for about 2 tomato slices, so I'm going to make 3 out of this potato. One of the most important things to do is to flatten and spread these out in the pan pretty soon after you put them in. About a couple minutes after it's been on its first side, most of the pinkness disappears, so I'm going to peek and check to see if they've browned. Not quite. I'm going to let them go for another 30 seconds to a minute. Alright, I'm getting impatient, so I'm going to go ahead and flip them. If bits of potatoes stray from the patty, just push them back in. Continue to encourage them down with some pressing. And this is where we turn these guys into pizzas. We're going to lower the heat to medium-low. I'm going to start off with a little parm. And it's okay if pieces of parm spill into the pan. They just get brown and yummy. That's why I highly recommend using a dry cheese like Parmesan for this task. Don't use an oozy one like mozzarella. It just makes a mess. And then you start to sprinkle the feta on top of that. And again, feta doesn't really melt much or really ooze, so it's a good cheese for this. Alright, and then about 2 thinly sliced tomatoes for each top. More like 3 slices per pizza. And at this point, all that remains is to put some very tiny basil leaves on top, or some chopped basil if you don't have tiny ones. Fresh oregano or any other fresh herb you have is also very good. So after it's cooked through for a couple minutes with the lid on, we're going to remove the lid and let it cook again for an additional minute or two with the lid off, just to ensure that the bottoms of the potatoes are nice and crispy and that it's not all soggy. And behold, it's... Ugh, the basil turned gray. And behold, its elegant hors d'oeuvre goodness. So there you have it, quick, elegant, and healthy. I like to enjoy mine with a